good. So we are back after 10 months of gap and with the promise that we are going to be consistent once again. So today's topic is going to be GraphQL. Now, what is GraphQL? What is the purpose and why do we use it? Where all can we use it? And what is it that is going to replace? So end to end, we are going to see skeleton to bones to muscle of GraphQL. End to end, we are going to cover and we are not going to prolong it more. We are only going to learn what is required at this moment, and then we are going to experiment as much as possible to deep dive into the GraphQL topic at the end of this video with the confidence that I can assure you, as you can say that you know GraphQL. And if you are following the steps that I am doing, I can assure you, you can go ahead and say to anyone that yeah, you know GraphQL now, and you can add that as one of your skill sets. So with that mention, buckle up your seatbelt, grab your coffee, and let's get started. So what is it that we are going to do today? So step one, we are going to build a Spring Boot microservice. GraphQL can be used with various frameworks, various technologies, but we are going to make use of the GraphQL with Spring Boot. Now to understand it, we'll spend first 2 to 3 minutes on the theoretical part of the GraphQL, but then what we are going to do is we are going to build a Spring Boot microservice and we are going to use the REST APIs, that is no GraphQL, nothing, and I'll give you the timestamp in between which we are going to build this. Later on in the same video, we are going to replace the REST API with the GraphQL. Now, coming back to the topic of what is the use of GraphQL. Let's take a very basic example. Let's say we are doing or trying to do perform a CRUD operations on the movies, for example. Okay, so for example, we have 10 movies. Okay, now the 10 movies can have the following attributes: the movie name, lead actor name, genre, and let's say producer name, and let's take one more attribute, IMDb. Okay, now there are, let's say, 1,000 movies in our database. Okay, now with the current understanding of the REST APIs, be it Spring Boot, Node.js, or any or Django, or any framework of any language, what is going to happen is the server is going to expose, let's say, to fetch all the movies. Okay, let's say we have an endpoint to fetch all movies. So for sure, when we say fetch all movies, what all we are going to get is we are going to get all this 5 attributes. Okay, but let's say similarly we have 100 more attributes. Okay, for the use case one, let's say for application one, use case one, all the attributes are required, then it is fine. Okay, but for use case two, let's say only 2 to 3 attributes are required. Okay, now if these 3 attributes required, but how many attributes we have? Let's say overall 100 attributes is required. So 3 attributes plus 97 more attributes. Okay, now you see what is happening here. One, the unnecessary network load, the unnecessary data is been transferred between the server and the client. Okay, so first is this unnecessary usage of the network bandwidth. The second thing is the cost that goes into it. Okay, the third thing is might be that all these are critical attributes. Okay, but we want only 3 critical attributes, so the scope of getting breached or leaking the information is increased because the information is more at that pipeline or in that request response. Okay, now uh, the third bullet that we can take is, let's say, okay, so you are aware of all this, and to reduce this you have the option to customize it in the REST API. So for that, what we need to do? Okay, so as a REST API developer with no knowledge of GraphQL, what is it that we are going to do? So you can take a pause here, think of it, and then play it again. So what we are going to do is we are going to either expose one more attribute, because that is a better thing either to compare to replacing the existing, right? So we are going to build one more API. Okay, we can say, let's say, follow up API. Now we are going to create in this new DTO, right? So what are the steps? Create new DTO and update or create new service layer logic, right? And then create new endpoint, and then we need to inform our end users that if you want only these 3 attributes, use this endpoint 2 instead of, let's say, yeah, 2 instead of the endpoint 1. Makes sense? Now let's say there's one more required came. So this API follow was for 3 attributes. Okay. Now tomorrow there's one more requirement came which says they want other list of three attributes. Okay. Then again for the three attributes you need to repeat this thing again. Okay. So we'll say API 1 follow up, API 2 follow up. Now if there is a requirement that instead of three they want four attributes, again you are going to repeat all these steps. All right, and you are going to say this is API 3 follow up. Right. So do you see what is the loophole that we have in REST API? We still not discussed anything about GraphQL. This is our existing knowledge. Okay. So what is happening here with the REST API is for every customer, or we can say it is very rigid. It is tightly coupled with the request attributes, right? So if this kind of things we want to minimize, or we want to find a solution for this literal solution, not this unnecessary solution. So there comes a picture of GraphQL. So in a simple two lines, we can say that GraphQL is query based communication, this thing. Okay. So what is the problem that we are solving? So instead of all these things, you stick to your API one. Okay. So we are sticking with API one itself, which was there in the REST, and it is there in the GraphQL. No difference, nothing in terms of development, in terms of logic, in terms of implementation. There's no change at all. Then what is that GraphQL solving here is when you are exposing the API with the REST API, these are all the steps that we need to do. But with the API one, if it is in GraphQL, okay, exposed again via GraphQL, what is going to happen is client can literally write a query. Okay. And client can write a query saying that what all attributes it need. Okay. Whether it's the attributes of API 1 follow up, API 2 follow up, API 3 follow up, it can only say that I want name. Okay. And say lead actor. Done. There's no change, nothing to be touched at the server side. Nothing is required. Okay. Oh, developer developed once and he can go to sleep. There's nothing to be worried about. The client, when he is developing, he can simply say what all things he want, and then he can simply call the same API. Okay. So let's see a bit more. Okay. Now this is application one. Okay. Then comes application two. Let's call it as client application one. Okay. And this is client application two. Now with the client application two, again he can write any query. Okay, right? He can write any query. He can say I want only name, or he can say I want all the 97 attributes, or I want all 100 attributes. Okay. So whatever they want, they can write the query and fetch it. I think this is the simplest possible definition we can have for GraphQL. So the server exposed that this is the data that you can expect when you're calling this endpoint. Okay, but you want to filter out, or you want to customize how you want the response from the server. You need not to modify the server. You can simply modify your query as a client and you will get the response accordingly. So you see what all benefits we have from GraphQL. I did not show you any implementation, but the logic is so simple that with a simple notepad, with the 2 minutes of explanation, we understood. Okay. So now let's jump onto the Spring Boot implementation of the REST API, followed by we'll replace it with the GraphQL. So I'm starting the Spring Boot implementation now. If you are already familiar with this, you can jump onto the timestamp above. What I will do is the Spring Boot implementation, I'll put in the GitHub. The link of that you can find in the description. Okay. So you can start either from the timestamp that is mentioned above, where we are going to replace the REST API with the GraphQL, or you can stick with me and do the implementation in the Spring Boot as I'm doing. Okay. So we opened incognito and we'll jump onto Spring initializer. Okay. And we'll call it as the Maven Java, and we'll take not snapshot, let's take the release version. And for the group, let's say com.dpoint.graphql. Just a reminder, please to subscribe. Okay, so coming back to this, our artifact name would be GraphQL learn. Okay, description would be the, okay, let's say server implementation of GraphQL, and we are going to use Postman as our client, so no need to worry about that. And then our package name, yeah, I think this much is enough. Okay. and then we'll go with jar, and I'm going with version 8. You can go with any other version because we are not going to use any uh, this version specific features for our basic implementation, so you are free to use your this thing. Okay, so dependencies, first we are going to add the REST APIs. For that we are going to take yes, okay, and then we are going to take the H2 database, and we are not going to write any test cases for now, but but since we are going to write the queries, let's take the JPA as well, and followed by which let's take a Lombok for getter, setter, build it, data, no args constructor, all args constructor for all such thing. Okay, and let's also take the dev. There was one dev spring boot dev tool. So with this dependency, what will happen is whenever you are doing any change in the code, the spring boot will auto reload. So we'll see how far we are going to use it, but it is the scope of this is only for the development purpose, not for the production release. So let's see how much this is going to be helpful. With this mention, let's generate it. So okay, I'll store it here, and then I'm going to extract it, extract all, and yes, and then I'm going to open it in my IntelliJ. If you are using Eclipse or any other thing, that is also fine. Open, and then yeah, let's go back to, so I'm selecting pom.xml, okay, and open as a project, trust project, this window. So first let's develop skeleton. Okay, I think my load is done. Source main Java, we don't have any other packages, right? So first let's start with the creation of model classes. So the model classes are nothing but our tables in the database. So we'll say model. I hope the font is visible. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. I hope now it is visible. So first we have created a package called model. Now after writing model, we are going to create a repositories package in which we are going to write the queries for the model tables. Okay, and after writing queries further, we need to use it in our logic, which is called a service layer. So let's create a service layer package service. And after creating the service logic, we are going to expose it. So we are going to create a controller package. Okay, now with that mention, we are going to set up our H2 database first. Let's call our entity as movies. Okay, so for that, yeah, let's go to model and create a new class, and then the class will give it as movie. And yeah, so this will be stored in the database. So let's implement this with the serializable. And as I mentioned above, if you are already familiar with the REST implementation in Spring Boot, you can jump onto that above stamp one and timestamp, and you can find it in the description as well. So if I open my notepad, yeah, so the attributes that we had was movie name. Let me take this back here. Okay, so we have a string called movie name, and then we have the, let's say, lead actor name. So we'll say string lead actor name. Then we have genre, and then we have producer producer, and then we have the, let's say, I will take double, and IMDb rating. Okay, and we'll see if any other required types is required, so we'll add that. But for now, with these attributes, we need to have a ID also, which we can say is going to be auto incremented. So for that, let's mark a column as ID, and that ID would be, let's take this, will be auto generated. And the strategy, we are going to go with the default strategy, but let's take this one, generation type dot default. Okay, my bad. Sometimes, okay, import from persistence and then identity, and let's call this column as integer and MID, that means our movie ID. So this is going to be one column, and this is going to be one more column, and this is going to be one more column, and same thing goes here. Let's create the IMDb. So we are good with this, with the key attribute and all the columns. Now let's tell the JPA that this is what the entity is. So we are going to add the entity annotation, followed by which we are going to add a table annotation, and let's call this as movie. Yeah, movies. No, movie. Yeah, movie is enough. Now, yeah, this should be named as name is equal to. What else are we missing here? So let's add a getter using Lombok and setter using this, and yeah, we're going to say no ours constructor, that is a default constructor. So with that mention, our movie class is done. Now we also want to create the repository for it. For that, what we are going to do is we are going to go to the repositories package, and we are going to say new, and this is going to be interface. So we'll say movie repo, okay, my spad repository. Okay, and this is an interface which is implementing uh okay, interface. It's if it's a class, then it is going to interface, right? So we can either use the GPA repository or CRUD repository. So feel free to be flexible enough, because we are not using the sorting level of algorithms as of now. So you can go with either of them. So I'll go with the CRUD repository, and then we are going to use it for our movie, whose primary key is of type integer. Okay, so as and when required, we'll write custom queries here, but as of now we don't have any requirement for a custom this thing. So let's add a repository annotation as well, which is coming from the R Spring framework. And with that mention, now let's move on to the service logic. So here we are going to write a logic, but first let's define movie service. Okay, now, in the movie service, we have to again define the annotation, stating that this should be aware, the Spring Boot should be, okay, let's give me 1 second. Yeah. So with this movie service, we need to, let's write all the function that we want it to do, right? So first it's going to be, let's say public, and then list of movies. Yeah, list of movie. Okay, import, and yeah, it's java.util, and we'll say fetch all movies. Okay, and then yeah, it should be interface. Okay, then we'll say public, let's say movie, only one movie. Okay, fetch movie. Then so there should be some filter, right? Which movie do you want? So let's take for now string movie name. Okay, now once the string movie name is done, what else is required? Let's say public movie create movie. Okay, so for creating movie, again we need what? We need a list of attributes. Let's call it as of now. Okay, let's create a DTO for that. So new, and what else do we need? We need only yeah, all the details basically. So let's go to package, and we'll say TTO. If you know what is a TTO, perfect. Otherwise it is simply data transfer objects. It means if for the communication from the server to client or client to server, the data that you will be transferring in form of object, we call it as data transfer object. Okay, so let's say we'll create this thing, Java class. Let's say movie create DTO. Straightforward. What all will be the attributes of it? So we'll go to movie, and we'll simply select all this. Yeah, MID is not required, so we need only till these attributes for the movie creation, because the MID is auto generated, right? So movie create DTO and this thing, and we don't have any column here, so let's remove this, and let's make it all private. Okay, perfect, 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 and give the annotation getter setter, no hours constructor, all hours constructor, and alt O for removing or optimizing the imports. We are good. Now let's okay close all the unnecessary tabs just to avoid the confusion. So we'll go to service again. Yeah, this will expect what movie create DTO. Okay. Now with this mention, now let's create the implementation of it. So new class. Yeah, movie service IMPL and implements movie service. We are good. Yeah, please override all the methods. Yes, all the methods, and we are going to mark this as service so that we can use it for auto wiring later on. Now to fetch all movies, what is it that we need? So we need to write a query on the table, right? For that reason, let's first get with the AutoWire our movie repository. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So simple, so straightforward. If you have used Spring and then you are using Spring Boot, you will understand what level of easiness or comfort we can, the features that we have available to develop now, right? So simply we'll say movie repositories dot find all. Okay, yeah. What is it saying? Mm, cast to yes. List of movies. Yeah, that is what we are doing. List of movies. It's always list of movie. What else does it need? Public. Yeah, it's the same. Let's see. Okay, so to resolve this error, there are two ways. Either I can cast this with this typecasting, or I can simply go to my repository and I'll say this as JPA repository. Okay, so now if I come back, this is gone. So straightforward, it is done. Of course, we need to add try catch and all such things, but for now, this much is sufficient. Okay, next we have a string movie name. So what is it that we need to do? Fetch movie. So we need to fetch the movie by movie name. So do we want to write a custom query? No, we have JPA now. Let's use it. So let's write a query here. Okay, so what is it that I want? Movie, right? And my query would become find movie by name. Oh, if we go to movie, we can see it was movie name. Yeah, so find movie by movie and then name. Just to be case sensitive, it is, yeah, it's this one. So N capital. Okay, so find by movie name, and we need to pass the argument saying string movie name. Straightforward. Now if let's take a worst case scenario, if we have same movie name for multiple movies, it could be a problem, right? So why to take a risk and write a custom logic again instead? Let's, because this is going, it can possibly return a list of movie. So let's say find first movie by movie name. Okay, I hope this is clear. Movie name, yeah. Now let's make use of it. Okay, so we will say movie repository dot find first movie by movie name, and our movie name is going to be this. Hope that makes sense. Now to create a movie, we have this. So let's create a movie object is equal to new movie. Okay, and what all attributes we have? The same thing we'll use movie dot set. Let's say movie name, then movie dot set. We have genre, then movie dot set genre producer, and then movie dot set lead actor name, then movie dot set what else I missed? IMDb rating. Yeah, so the same things we have as from the DTO. So let's say movie created DTO dot get movie name, movie created DTO dot get genre. Oh, my bad. Movie create DTO. Let's take this dot get producer dot get lead actor name dot get IMDb rating. So we are all good. Now we have to again make, don't write custom query, right? So movie repository dot save movie. Straightforward, all good. Of course, in real we'll write try catch and all. Yeah, now let's expose it via controller. So we'll close all the unnecessary stuff. Let's go to controller and we will say I want a class which is a movie controller. So hope you are able to uh, get it what we are doing, right? We wrote a movie entity, then repository, then its logic. Now we are exposing it, and in between for the communication, we wrote the DTO. As of now, we didn't do anything related to GraphQL. Split and move right. Let's minimize this. So simply we'll say that this is my REST controller, and the base endpoint of this would be movie request mapping slash movie. And in the movie controller, let's say we want a service because we need it, we want that logic to be used here, right? So we'll say auto wired, and what is it that we want? Movie service, movie service. Okay, so I'm getting the interface auto wired because whatever is the implementation, our springboard is going to fetch it. Otherwise we can say impl as well. Okay, it's up to us. Okay, let's go with the interface which is a recommended best practice. Okay, now we are going to say public list of books, movie, list of movie, and java util. So which API do we want to call? Fetch all movies. Let's give the same name, though we can give the different one. Let's give the same name. Okay, and here I want to give movie service dot fetch all movies, and this is going to be my get mapping, right? And do I want to give any value? Slash movie slash would be enough, right? And I need to return this. Okay, similarly next let's say fetch movie. So this time post mapping, and I will say public, I want only one movie. Okay, and we will say fetch, let's give the same name, fetch movie, and I'll pass an argument, but finally I need to say movie service dot find, no, yeah, fetch movie, and the string movie name I need to pass here as well. Okay, now we need to define. Now we can create one more DTO and call this as a request body. But since it's only one argument, do we want to create a complete DTO just for this one single argument, provided that it's not even sensitive at all? So let's make it as get mapping, and in this we are going to make this as a path variable. Okay, so just for simplicity, we are going to give all small cases because sometimes there is issue with the caps in the URL. So let's not try to get into such issues, and we are going to call it as a path variables. So let's take this movie name and put it inside the flower braces, which means that it is a dynamic placeholder, where it's not dynamic placeholder, but it's a placeholder which will get a dynamic values. Okay, now finally there's one more public list of movie, which is going to simply give us fetch all, oh sorry, that is done. Yeah, it's again the list, no, it's simply going to be a movie which is going to be create movie, right? And this we can call it as return movie service dot create movie. Now what movies needs to create? This DTO it needs to get. So let's get that DTF from here, movie create DTO, and pass the same here. Okay, we can yeah, this should be the variable, not the class. Let's make it post mapping, and we want to pass what all things here. It's just this request body. Okay, so here is the thing. If yeah, GraphQL, I want to speak about GraphQL, but will it be the right time? Yeah, let's just give, I'll give just one concept here. So in GraphQL we have three things. One is mutation, one is query, and one is a subscription. So by the name itself you can say what do we, oh, was it not visible to you? Let me close this. Yeah, hope so. What is it that this three differences, and when can we use which one? To simply do the read operation, we'll use something called querying. Okay, to do any updates modification, we'll use something called mutation, because the name itself says you are mutating or you are changing the state of an entity. Okay, then we have something called subscription, so it's just the same concept as we have in the event subscription. So now let's focus on this, and we are going to go with the default base URL, that is slash move, and then in this body we are going to get this. So shall we test it? Yeah, let's test it. So I'll start this application, and we'll go here, run, and yeah, it's loading because it's first time. It's going to take a bit, and then we are going to go here and we are going to open. Yeah, let's stay on this for now. So we can see H2 console. Oh, we did not define our H2 console yet, right? So it's going to take the dynamic variable. So we don't want that, right? We want to. Okay, let me show you this log. Yeah. So it's going to take this URL JDBC H2 in memory database with the this is our database name. We don't want the database name to change every time. So let's go to resources, application properties, and let's define a few things here, but I don't like properties, so I'm going to refactor, rename, and I'm going to use the YML. Okay, so first of all, server colon port, this port, let's stick to 8081 because there are so many things running on 8080. As of now it was successful, but I don't want to take the risk. Now we are going to consider few database properties. So for that, resources, and we are going to write spring. Then we want the h2 console to be enabled, and by default it's enabled, but just to avoid any kind of conflict, let's make it enabled explicitly true. And then after spring h2 we want to define a data source, and the URL, as we can see, this is the value, right? So JDBC and the type of the database, and we can have either in memory or we can have it in the file. So we are going to go with the in memory. So the same going to be our database URL, but apart from that we also need to give what is the database name. So in our case it's going to be the movies database name. Okay, next we need to give the data source driver class name. Okay, so for that, driver class name, and we are going to give the arg h2 driver. So that is an h2 driver. So even if I don't give, it's taking the default values based on the dependency. So let's try to give as less properties as possible. So the URL we have given, the username, the default thing it will take, but let's give username as I say, and password, let's go with an empty password just to show that this is also possible. So after this, we are also going to say that if the tables are not created, right, you create it for me. Okay, so for that purpose we need to use JPA, and we need to say that JPA, this is the hibernate, and in the DDL format, that is DDL auto, what is the default thing that you need to do is I'll say create. Okay, and after this I also want to know that what all queries it executed. So in the JPA I'll say show SQL and true. So by default it will be false. I am explicitly saying that please use this. Okay, and again, the yeah, with this I think it would be sufficient. Let me clear the logs and restart again. Okay, we'll see what all things it is doing. So it started on 8081, and it executed these tables it created, and it is running on 8081. So let's open this localhost, then 8081 slash h2 console. Okay, so this is the test DB, but what is our database? So our database is movies database, right? So let's go here and we'll call it as movie database. SA is our username, password we have given nothing, so let's click on connect, and we can say movies database is created. Let's run it. As of now we can see all these are there, but it's all empty, right? So we want to fetch some operation, so let's do that, because even if we create, next time if we start again it's going to go away, right? So let's create a few records. So for that what we are going to do is let's take this So as soon as the application starts, I want to insert few data in the application. So for that purpose, let's minimize everything that is not required and we'll go to the main application. Now here we are going to say that as soon as the application starts, you need to execute few things for me, just like finally for the try catch block. Okay, so I'm going to add a command line runner, and yeah, please do implement methods for me. Okay, and here I'm going to simply create few movies and going to insert it. So for inserting in the this thing, I need to have auto wired and then movie service movie service, because there I have the create method, right? But yeah, I don't want to pass any DTO, so let's directly take movie repository. Okay, and here let's create movie m1 is equal to new movie. And if you remember, we had a default constructor, that's why we need not to m2 is equal to new movie. And let's have one more movie, m3 is equal to new movie. Okay, so finally movie repository dot save movie m1. Okay, similarly m2 and m3. Okay, let me populate this and then we can continue. Okay, so with these details in mention, let me clear the console, let me clear my page. Hope you are able to see. So I've created a movie 1 with all the details being populated, movie 2 with all the details being populated, movie 3. Okay, now if you can see in producer, we can have multiple produce. We do have multiple produce. In the actors, again, we have multiple actors. So not to confuse you with so many counts at a time, I'm taking the first lead or the first producer as an example, and later on we are going to see about the nested, not in this video, of course, the follow-up season. But in this, as soon as I'm going to, let's run it. Okay, so now I'm expecting this to be inserted in my h2 database, and we are going to perform few operations using postman. So let's see h2 console. Okay, these three got inserted and it's running on 8081. So let's go here, refresh it, yes, continue, and connect and movie and run. So I can see these three are inserted. Right now let's perform the REST API operations via postman. Okay, so let's create a collection and let's make it star, and we'll name it as Dpoint GraphQL. And if we expand it, let's create a request, and the first request would be to fetch all movies. Okay, and how we are going to do that? Simply give localhost 8081 slash movies. That's it, and send. Okay, not found. What is wrong here? 8081, is it this one? Okay, let me check. Okay, it's not movies, it's movie, and send. So we can see we got all the three. Okay, it's straightforward. This was nothing uh, special that we did. Okay, let's duplicate this and let's rename it as fetch specific movie. Okay, and then in this movie we are going to call one of our movie name. Let's say where is our movie? Oh, it's in this column. Fine. So let's say I want this movie and send. Okay, so we are getting a specific movie, right? Let's take one more example, Inception, and there you go. Okay, send. So we are getting that. Let's save it and let's create one last uh, yeah, so this is going to be the mutation type, like the modifying one, right? So yeah, create movie. Later on we are going to do all these three operations using GraphQL. So post and the movie, and then we have body and then raw. So as of now we are going to use JSON, but once we do the other implementation we are going to use GraphQL, right? So I'll simply take all the attributes which is this one, right, except for MID. This is what we need to pass here. So now yeah, let me take it here, and let's say this is going to be our movie name action. Yeah, let me populate this. So let's go with the movie which all of us knows. Let's say this movie is The Shawshank Redemption, and the lead actors were many, but I'm going to take one as of now. So it's going to be Tim, and then the genre is going to be drama, and the producer is going to be Neki Marvin. And let me populate, and finally our IMDb rating was 9.3, and let's create it. Send, and we can see we got this movie created because we can see the MID got created, right? Let's validate once by running it again, and we can see there's a fourth movie got created in our movie database. Now simply we need to, okay, this is the timestamp where we have completed our REST based Spring Boot implementation. Okay, so what all things we need to do to replace this is, let's go step by step. Okay, so the step one for this would be to go into the resources. Let's delete this unnecessary files which is required for front end but not for our sake. So okay, let me close all this, and the first thing to start for anything is by going to pom.xml, and let's, okay, let me minimize it so you get the more required view. And let's, okay, this is a test phase. Let's say dependency, and we need to add, okay, it's loading, spring boot starter graphql. Okay, and then there you go. Okay, nothing much, just simply we added the graphql dependency, and then we are going. Now let's go to our controller, and I'll not remove anything, I'll just comment it so that at any point of time you have a reference. I need to comment REST controller, and I need to comment request mapping, and I need to add controller. Because for example, if I very minute straightforward, if I return abcd, okay, REST controller will return a string called abcd, but the controller will find the context what is abcd string. If we are implementing JSP and servlet, it is going to return abcd.jsp. Okay, similarly at the rate controller has many differences compared to REST controller. So REST controllers is very specific to REST. Okay, controller will be generic to communication. So now this is going to remain as it is. Instead of get mapping, what we need to do is we need to replace it with the our GraphQL queries. So to replace it with the GraphQL queries, first I need to write the queries, right? So let's write the queries first. So where should I write the queries? I need to create a folder called GraphQL. Now is it fixed? Yes, it is fixed. It is not fixated to the resources, it is fixated to the class path. So if you are changing your class path, you can keep this directory anywhere else as well. Okay, now in this we need to give schema dot graph QL S. Okay, so it's GraphQL schema is the extension. Okay, so we'll go here and we'll start writing our queries, which we are going to again map it to our controller. So first let's start with writing the reading queries. Okay, which this reading queries itself is called a queries. Later on we'll going to write the modifying queries, which we call it as a mutation. So first let's define what is it that we are going to use. So I'm going to use the movie. Okay, and this movie, do I need to write everything here? No, let's simply go to model movie, and I'll simply copy all this thing. Okay, let me bring it side by side, split and move right, close the unnecessary thing. So in the type movie I need to define what is the attributes of it. So first I'll say MID, and then colon, then its data type. So here I'm using the Spring Boot data types, which is relevant for the connecting database. Similarly, here I'm going to use the GraphQL database. So in my case, it's a capital case ID, and then the next, no comma, no semicolon, nothing. Then my next this thing would be movie name, where I'm going to give the type as string because it is present with both of them. Okay, similarly I'm going to give the lead actor name, and then I'm going to give genre, and then I'm going to give producer. Why genre? Oh, they should be small, but yeah, that's fine, we'll stick to what we have written. Okay, usually it should be small case. So all these are string which is present in the GraphQL. Let's give it string, again string. But coming to producer, yeah, it's a string, and final one is IMDb rating. So in our case, it's a double, but for the GraphQL, it's going to be float. Okay. Now, since this is done, now let's define the queries. Okay. Again, the queries are the ones which cannot modify the data, but can do only read operation. So in the query, what is our first query? The first thing is the name of the query. So let's say fetch all books. Okay. Does it need any arguments? No, then we need not to give it. But what after the colon, what is the data type, or we can say what is it that it is returning? So it's simply returning the list of movies. Yeah, not movies, movie. And what else it is doing? It is also giving me a specific movie. For that I need to give one more query name, because it's a different I can say API, right? GraphQL API. So for that, let's say it would be fetch specific movie. It's not books, it's movie. And then fetch specific movie. Okay, so here what it is going to give me, it is simply going to give me a single movie, not the list, right? So we have written here. Now we need to go to the controller. So let's go to controller, and here we are going to map this. So first of all, this fetch all movies, so fetch all movies will be mapped to get mapping. So we need to comment the get mapping, and I need to say this is going to be the query. Okay, and to which query are we mapping this? To this query. So it's simply when I'm hitting this URL, this endpoints to get executed. Similarly, when I am hitting this query, this logic should get executed. Similarly, I am going to comment this again. Okay, and I'm going to say at the rate query mapping, and this fetch movie is going to be this one, fetch specific movie. Okay, now from where it is going to get this path variable? For that, instead of path variable, I need to use something called argument. So the annotation will, okay, let me not remove it. I'll simply take a copy of it, move to next line, and I'll comment the first line. Okay, so this path variable is used with the endpoint, and this at the rate argument we will use with the query mapping. So I hope these two are clear. Now let's comment this as well, and let's restart. I need not restart, it can auto reload, but just to showcase you when we are trying, when we are like to give that slice milestones in between, I'm restarting every now and then, otherwise my dev tools will take care. Okay, so we are good with this. Now let's try to duplicate fetch all movies. So I'll say duplicate, and this time I'll call fetch all movies using GraphQL. So because it's a get mapping, I don't have a body, but here I will say GraphQL. And if you remember, I don't have a base endpoint as well, because that base endpoint I've removed it from here. If you see this, see the slash movie is gone. So let's go to body, and then raw, and then instead of raw we have direct option for GraphQL. So in the GraphQL, first we are going to start with writing of the query. So it start with the keyword called query, and then we have to write the query name. What is our query name? So if we see, our query name is fetch all movie, and do we need to pass any argument? No. So we'll simply say fetch all movie, and we'll say what all the attributes that we want. This is why we are doing, right? So let's say I want only ID. So let's hit send, and we see 405 method not allowed. Let's see what is wrong. Yeah, so what is wrong is, one thing is, if you check in our type, okay, our type has MID and not this thing, right? So we need to give MID. Okay, now second thing is, what is this? This is what? A body. So a GET request can have a body? No, right? So we need to pass post and simply say send. So you see, we are getting all the movie IDs that we have in our database. So let's try to get few more details. So for that, let's say movie name and send. So we can see we are getting, okay. Similarly, lead actor name. So again send, we are getting again the same. Okay. So you see, I don't need to define different attributes for getting a different set of attributes. So let's get IMDb rating, send. I'm getting it for all. So I hope you understood. Okay. Now let's try to get one more thing. So let's fetch specific movie. Okay, let's duplicate this, and we'll say not this one, GraphQL, and we'll say it is also a post, and in the body we are going to say it's a GraphQL, and we are going to say this is a query, and the query name would be, go to here, and the query name would be fetch specific movie, and this is my query. Now if you see, it does need any argument. Yeah, fetch specific movie needs this argument, but have we defined it? We have not. So let's define it first. So we'll say this is a query which needs an argument called a movie name, and then colon the type of the argument. Okay, string. So let's rerun, and now let's meanwhile give this movie name. So we are going to go to Postman, and we are going to say that, hey query, this is the argument, right? And let's give it a value. So in our case, let's see if it is run. Yes, it is done. We'll go here, and one of our movie name was The Dark Knight. So let's go here and go to Postman, and we will say this is my movie name. Okay, maybe it takes double quote. Yes. And now in the query, what all do you need again? Let's say I want only my movie ID. Sufficient? Yes, send. So now let's see, we can see we have the exact the MID that we want. Okay, now let's say what else do I want. I want price. No, it's IMDb rating, then it's some movie name, and send. So whatever you need you are getting. So you see, again the same thing, that we are passing all the attributes that we need the response for. Now coming to the final part where we need to write the mutation query. So we'll go here, and let's clear the console, and let's type this query. So our type of query would become mutation, and we'll say create movie. Okay, and let's see what all to do, but before that let's take this create movie, and we are going to map this here at the rate mutation mapping instead of query mapping, and we are going to say whenever I say create movie, you need to run this method called create movie. Now what does it need? It needs a movie create DTO, but will this be aware of it? No, right? The GraphQL doesn't know what is a movie create DTO. So we need to create a type called a movie create DTO, and then we have to give all the attributes. So it's the same attribute, just that MID is not available. All right. So we can say that movie create DTO is what it needs, and the expected output would be a single movie that is created when we call the create movie method. Yeah. But by this time, I hope you are able to find what is it that we need to give, right? So here we wanted to fetch specific movie which had the argument, but for create movie again we need to pass the movie input, right? So this is something that we need to find. So let's say movie create a request. This is the name. You can give anything, but what should be the type of that attribute? It should be this thing. Now it is aware what is it, right? So we are getting a red line as of now. Let's ignore this, and yeah, I think that it will detect the type movie is not an input type. Okay. Yeah, my bad. This would be an input type. Okay, it's I. Okay, so input, what are all the different types and what are all the different things that we have available in GraphQL is all that we will explore and deep dive once we do cross this level 1. So here we are simply saying this is my query, this is what I'm going to pass, and I want this to be returned. So that will be taken care by our create movie corresponding controller. Let's recreate it, stop and rerun, and meanwhile let's go and build our this thing. So save it, save it, save it, close, close. Yeah, close everything. Yeah, now let's go to create movie and we'll duplicate this. Okay, and rename GraphQL. Okay, So let's open this and we'll simply say GraphQL slash, and this is going to be the post request obviously, and in body instead of this we need to pass the GraphQL. Okay, so here I'm going to say the first it is that it is a query, and then I'm going to say what is the query name. Okay, so what was the query name? The query name is create movie. Okay, create movie, and it needs to pass some arguments, and then we will getting the response. Let's say I want the MID of it, but in the create movie, what is it that we need? So we need to pass movie create request. So let's say movie create request. Okay, and then the data type of it was an object, so we need to pass this object, which I can. Okay, let's take me from this. Yeah, so movie name I'll take from here, and similarly I need to pass all these three as well. And yeah, I passed only one. Yeah, I clicked enter instead of it, so I need to pass all this, and it should be inside this, it should be inside this, and I need to clear this. Okay, I hope the font is visible, but yeah, let me try to maximize this. Okay, it's fine. I'll have this postman collection also in the GitHub, but yeah, coming to this one, the attribute name doesn't need to have double quote, only the value needs to have a double quote if it's a string. Okay, so we see all these are created, we are getting the proper response. That one more good thing, right? We need not to define our custom exception, though we can define it, but see, it is giving itself all the exceptions and errors that we are missing or we need to follow. I hope that is one more advantage of GraphQL. So let's add one more name as well, lead actor name and movie name. Yeah, minimum details. Okay, and then let's send it. Okay, what it is saying, create movie is in a type query at the rate create validation error field undefined. What happened? Create movie is a mutation and not the query. Yeah, mutation, and there we go, send. So we can see still we are getting the error. Okay, let's go through this. What is it that is wrong here? uh, Let me read through the error. Okay, so it's saying that it contains a field which is not there in the create movie. So what is it? GENRE. Yeah, it's because it's a capital G. Let's try this out. Send, and yeah, internal error. Okay, it might be the due to the issue of case sensitive only. Let's see. The data that we got was null. Why? Because create movie is not created. If I go to my server and if I check the logs, okay, and if I check the controller, yeah, DTO was not recognized by any resolver. Please refer to the documentation. Okay, so there are so many silly things. Okay, let's see. So these small semicolon exclamation. Okay, so if I give a genre, okay, and I send it, so I can see it's clearly mentioning that it contains a field which movie contains, which is passed as part of create movie, does not have. Okay, so it was a capital G. Okay, which was our first thing that we did. So now if I send it, okay, still we are getting a validation error. Okay, and what is the data that we are getting returned? We can see it's a null. So what is it that we missed? As if you see, we changed the mutation mapping, but we didn't change the request body. So request body is specific to request controller or rest controller, but for the mutation mapping it needs to be argument as we used above, right? So we'll simply do a restart for the one last time, and yeah, so this was the basic mistake, and it could be easily identifiable by the logs, okay, because the data is not can be seen in the DDO. Okay, let me remove this debug points, and it started on 8081. Let's go ahead and say yeah, go ahead and send. Okay, perfect. So I see the data that is returned to me by the create movie is a movie, but in that movie I wanted only these three attributes, so I'm getting it. Okay, so I hope this is all good. Now let me close all these three and open the GraphQL things again. So if I want to fetch all movies, I am getting all the four movies. If I want to fetch the specific movie, I'm going to get a fetch specific movie and I'm going to say this is my movie that I want and I'm getting that. Similarly, the create movie. Okay, so as you can see, all are working without much changes compared to what we have implemented in the rest versus how we have modified to make use of it as a GraphQL. Now let's say a situation, because this is a server and I as a client want to use it. I'm using it because the server has the GraphQL already implemented. But what will happen if the server is not implementing GraphQL? Can I use it? Yeah, one such possible way would be a middleware which can get the response from the server, and then it can modify the response to give back to the client as per their GraphQL calls, because the middleware will have the GraphQL implemented. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so we'll try to find out how to make use of subscriptions, how to make or what all different things we have available in GraphQL, and what all other benefits of GraphQL are still there which we have not made use of. I hope the video so far is very informative, and I would like to share one video or credits which I have used for understanding apart from our GraphQL documentation. Yeah, so it is this video with by Durgesh which I have used to easily explain GraphQL, and this is not the end. There are many things too much to deep dive which you'll find in this series. And apart from this, if you are aware, we are already having the crypto series which is going on, which where we covered all the concept. Now we are trying to work on the implementation part, so stay tuned for all those videos as well. But GraphQL is not done yet, but with this knowledge, with this implementation, I hope you will be able to say that you know what is GraphQL, how to implement, or even how to migrate it. And we'll see various design patterns that we can use to migrate, not only migrate, but to fit the GraphQL in our use case. With that mention, that's all for today. Try it out, and you can check the description for the GitHub link where I will share without implementation of Spring Boot, and which you can continue further, simply modifying the existing repo with the GraphQL implementation. So those two things you can find in the GitHub link below. And if you have any queries while implementing, do let me know in the comment section. But overall, do subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you. That's all for today.